Okay, hailing frequencies are open. Hello there, faithful viewer, and welcome to our very first episode, our pilot, if you will, of the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast. If you're joining us, you've presumably either seen the trailer that's been doing the rounds or you've joined our YouTube channel or Twitter page already. But basically, in case you haven't, this being our first episode, I'm going to go over the form that it will take. But first of all, I couldn't do this on my own. I've had to introduce a guest. And it's a very special guest, a friend of mine for well over 2 decades now. Over 20 years of talking Star Trek. And so my friend, Stephen Brown, or Browny as I know him. Hello, Browny.
Oh, God. Hello, mate. Hello, mate. Thank you for the invite. That was 20 years. Oh, my God.
I know, right? All those years and all those terrible in-jokes about don't come between me and the blood wine and various bits like that.
That was going to be my sign-off. You've stolen it already. Oh,
I'm so sorry. I could always edit that out. But yeah, so just for your sake and for the sake of the viewers, as this is the first episode, there's a few different sections that we're going to break this into. We're hopefully going to get it well under an hour 15 to an hour and a half. The sections will be basically getting to know you, a hit or miss section in which I'm basically going to throw, it'll be 5 things because it's a 2-part episode we're reviewing. So 5 things from anywhere in the world of Star Trek and ask if you think they're a hit or a miss. And, you know, we're not saying anything's, diabolical or an abomination to canon or anything, just some things miss with you on a personal level and some things, might react differently. So we'll take that from there. Then the actual episode review, we'll get into the bulk of it. Then Gene's vision section, which is how the episode fits into the ideology of Trek. We'll give our conclusion and score. Then we'll have some audience interaction, and that should wrap things up, hopefully in time. So, without any further ado, I'll just segue us straight into section 1, which is the section that I call Hailing Frequencies Open. So, and this basically is just a getting to know you thing. So it occurs to me that I've known you all those years. We've watched a lot of Trek together. We've talked about episodes as they've aired. And yet I've never actually asked you this before. But what got you first interested in Star Trek? And what was the first thing you watched that kind of hooked you in?
I think, if anything, probably circumstance.
Right.
In catching it at the right time on television. For me, it was always 6 o'clock, BBC 2.
Right.
There was some sci-fi on. And one of the first sci-fis was TNG, Next Generation. So you were having me dinner with my parents, things like that. And, being forced to do the dishes was me as my bit of my chores. And, pop the TV on, 6 o'clock, get me sci-fi on, get some Star Trek. And that's probably the introduction, really. And then, Next Gen from there.
Cool. Do you have a favourite series? Is it Next Gen? Because that was kind of the first one that you were drawn to.
Ooh, that is a tough one. It's been a while since I've watched them. I happen to have actually been watching them all recently, and I'm just going through Next Gen at the moment.
Yeah.
I think some of my fondest memories would probably be DS9.
Right.
So I don't know why. Yeah, maybe just the space battles, because space battles amazing.
Yeah. Definitely, yeah. Well, we want to see all the HD footage of it that we'll never probably get until they release them on Blu-ray, but we'll wait and see. But that's fine. So DS9 as your sort of number one is interesting, and I think it's something you'll share with a lot of people, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. Every series has its own special place.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But I think there were certainly some episodes I enjoyed more in DS9. But certainly just rewatching them, I'll say, the Next Generation recently, there's great episodes I'd completely forgotten about.
That's weird, but fair enough. Okay. And not to put you on the spot, but if you had to pick, say, 3 episodes that you think represented the best of Star Trek, or the best for you that you've really loved more than any 3 across any of the series, what do you think they would be?
Oh, God. If you don't go with All Good Things, then yeah.
Fair enough. Okay.
That's just great. I suppose Best of Both Worlds won all the awards and things like that, so that's always a
Yeah.
good one to get people introduced. Third one. Ooh, don't know. There we go. Trials and Tribulations. Who doesn't
Interesting.
love tribbles?
That way you're getting DS9 and TOS in there, two for the price of one.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, just that was just a little bit of getting to know you just for the viewers and stuff, and it's educated me a little bit as well. So there you go. So we'll move on into the next section, which is the possibly soon to be infamous hit or miss section. And as I said, because we're doing a 2-part episode, we're just going to do 5 things this week, where I'll just shoot them out, and then you'll tell me whether you think they're a hit or a miss, and a little bit of reasoning why, and then I'll give my thoughts as well after yours, and whether I agree or disagree.
Sure.
I haven't given you anything in advance because that will be the way we do this, just so that the listeners and everything know. It will truly be on the fly because this is the first time you're hearing any of the things I'm putting to you. So
you're building this up here. I'm getting stressed. Come on.
So I'll jump straight in that case before we get any more nervous, and I'll say that I don't know why I picked these, by the way. They're just completely random. But number 1 on my list that I made up for this is hit or miss Jadzia Dax.
Yeah, hit.
And why especially do you think where the character is a hit?
Well-rounded character. Obviously, odd that they changed the trill for DS9, because you see them in Next Gen, and they are very different in there. I don't know if that was ever explained in canon, actually.
Not really, no.
Interesting one. But yeah, no, good character. Fitting well. The actress was obviously very pleasing to look at, so that never hurts.
Fair enough. And I would agree with you. I think Jadzia Dax was a hit. It was good to have that the level of acceptance of knowing somebody, I think, through all those lives and stuff. So her relationship with Cisco was kind of really sweet in that regard. The fact that she was multi-layered because of all the lives, so she had the Klingon culture thing and all that as well. Plus a friendship with Kira and a bit of a will they, won't they with Dr. Bashir. So every kind of crew member had something to do, but the character, I think, was strong and, not to be cliche, but strong and independent and stood up for herself as well. And I think Terry Farrell was a great actress, so I would say hit as well.
It's good how it developed in there over the years, definitely. I think that's the same with any of them. Just how the characters develop and you grew to love them and things like that.
Oh, completely, yeah. It's a shame that she was killed off because of all the controversial reasons and stuff, but I do like Esri, but it is a shame we didn't get to finish the series with the original Jadzia Dax.
Yeah, this is true.
Anyway, we'll move to number 2. Then number 2 on the section, hit or miss Section 31.
Ooh. Now we're talking, what I would say, the core 3 Section 31, because obviously you've got Discovery in Section 31 there, and that's a completely different ball game. But the Sloan side of it, I suppose they did touch a bit with it in Enterprise and early Section 31 there.
They did.
But yeah, Sloan and all that sort of intrigue with Bashir. Yeah, good.
Okay.
It's always one of those things like, really curious exactly. You'd like to know more about exactly what they're interfering with in the background and stuff like that, but it never quite gives you that much information.
Well, it did eventually with Discovery and stuff, I think, but that's the thing. It was kind of regarding Section 31 as a whole, because you're going through DS9, Enterprise, Discovery, and Into Darkness. I guess you have to consider as well. So
that's true. Yeah, I never thought about that side of it. Absolutely, yeah.
Overall, for canon, what do you think? Do you think Section 31 evens out as a hit or a miss?
As the cover in the show, it goes against certain parts of what the Federation stands for, but no, I think they're good hit.
Okay, I will disagree. I think it's a miss, slightly controversially, just for me, because of what you said. It's antithetical to the idea of Star Trek and to, the great Gene's vision stuff, not to get all highfalutin about it all, but I can't really make peace with it. And if we're taking it as a whole, I'm really not fond of how contradictory it is, because in DS9, it's like super secret. Nobody could possibly ever know anything about it. And in Discovery, it's just operating openly and everybody knows who they are, which kind of ruins the, I guess, continuity of it all.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't like the idea of Starfleet having a Black Ops, because it seems contrary to the very idea for me, which isn't to say that I hate all the episodes or anything with them in. I absolutely don't. I think the Discovery episode, Such Sweet Sorrow, I've said many times, is one of my favourite episodes in the franchise, and that's basically one big battle with Section 31, although more so, I suppose, Control. But yeah, so I don't hate all the ideas or anything in it, and I'll still watch them, but I just think as an idea for me, not super great. 3 is the series Star Trek Picard, hit or miss.
I'm enjoying it. I'm looking forward to season 2. Even without Q being dropped in there, I was looking forward to seeing where the story went. It's a different spin on it. I think for me, the core Star Trek for me is Next Gen to Voyager. That block of 3. The extra ones are all good. I'm enjoying them. Not quite as good though as for me the core Star Trek.
So your heyday is kind of the 90s into the early 90s.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose late 80s to early 90s, isn't it? Well, that's fair. It's something you clearly share with Seth MacFarlane if you've watched The Orville. I think that's a fair assumption because that is just basically that era, isn't it? So,
absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, so
I think it's got room to grow. It's only the first season. If you go off the first season of most of them, they were very rough. Certainly, I remember rewatching the start of TNG. It was very rough. As I suppose we'll talk about later on with bits. But yeah, there was plot holes. It asked a lot of questions, and some things in it I think were a bit like, oh, what they could do in here. Well, what's all that about? And where did they get this massive fleet from?
They clearly pasted it because it's all the same bloody ship.
It is, yes, it was. It's like, you have the Dominion War and they've got all their fleets. Then all of a sudden, Riken just pull out of his backside a massive fleet of brand new Federation ships. Yes, that was a bit like, well, I get it. It's a nice spectacle, but
is it? Because it was pretty disappointing that it was so poorly rendered that they didn't have like registries or phaser banks or anything. It was just formless grey blobs really on screen, wasn't it?
Almost, yes. I've certainly seen some commentaries about it, and they go through the different classes and things, and it's like, that's a bit weird. Why they haven't done it? They would have known it was coming for a while and had time to prepare it. And you are effectively copying and pasting something. So why is it so rough when you're just transposing that image around the screen?
It's a shame, but having said that, they clearly had something in mind, or it's been developed, because the Eagle Moss model of the Zheng He from that scene is fantastic. Now that they've actually developed it and given it detail, it looks really good, But anyway, that's slightly off topic, but we never did get your answer. So for what we have so far, which is only the one season, hit or miss for Picard?
I'm going to go hit because it's got potential.
Okay, so hit because of potential. That's fair enough. That's a fair enough reason. I'm going to, again, disagree, and I'm going to say it's a miss so far for me. Ooh. But again, not that I'm saying it's the worst thing ever. And I probably, as you pointed out, probably would have said the same thing about Next Gen, DS9, and Enterprise after their first seasons. So it's not like I would stop watching and be like, this is terrible, it's an abomination. But for me, I just couldn't get on board with the story. It didn't interest me at all. It seemed really not Star Trek. And I know it's kind of silly, geeky stuff, but I just miss Starfleet. And I miss having like a hero Starfleet ship and the uniforms. And that's kind of what I sign up for with Trek, not these random sort of side quests that basically turn into the video game Mass Effect and stuff. It's kind of the ship design is terrible in my opinion. The La Serena, it looks like something from one of the old Wipeout PlayStation games. It doesn't look Starfleet at all. Yeah. Which it isn't, in fairness. But
you beat me to that. Yeah, it's not. So,
but even still, it doesn't seem to fit in that universe of kind of freighters and smaller ships and stuff. And like I say, I just don't like the main plot line. The metaphors are all muddled, and at the very end, the kind of big epic machine life threat from another galaxy came from nowhere and was dispatched in 10 minutes and never really got a chance to do anything. And I think that's fundamental of all of it. The other thing was the relationship between Raffi and Seven, which came at the very last minute of the show out of absolutely nowhere.
Was it a relationship that were holding hands?
Well, it is now. I mean, they've all confirmed it on social medias and stuff. It's like, we're going to really get into it, and this is what it is. And it's kind of like, I have no issue with the fact that it's two women. I'm fine with that. My issue is you've done nothing to set this up at any point in the 10 episodes.
Not even a little like stare across the bridge sort of thing. It's just like, holding hands. Yeah,
they gave Seven that really beautiful scene. One of the few scenes I love with Picard about kind of their shared trauma about being former Borg and stuff. Give her one scene like that with Raffi about how they've both suffered trauma and they see something in each other or whatever. Just give us anything so that it's not like, oh, that's a thing, is it? All right. For me, I think overall it's just a bit of a miss, but definite potential. Like I said, there's things I like, a couple of speeches I like, an episode or two that I really loved, and I always liked the first episode and bits of the second, and then it just develops into I could care less, to be honest. Like the most damning thing I can say is that when it comes to the new characters, I genuinely don't give a crap if I ever see them again, which is not a good thing to say. They could reveal that every one of the characters except sort of Jean-Luc and Seven had been killed off, and I would be fine with it because they've got no personalities really. And
absolutely, the Romulan kid with the sword is just the Romulan kid with the sword.
He's just a Lord of the Rings elf because somebody thought it would be cool.
Yes, nail on the head a bit there. My God.
Anyway, well, we'll move on anyway because we spent too long on that, and I'll say that number 4 of the 5 we're doing is hit or miss the Xindi arc from Enterprise, and I've seen opinions divided both ways on this on the internet recently. So.
Oh God,
it's not supposed to be a stumper.
Didn't see this one coming.
That's the idea.
Yeah. That entire thing, I'm going to go with a miss straight off because
right,
it was built up all the that rift that they're in. It's all doom and gloom getting through, and they're getting hit by pirates and all that, and then it just seems to accelerate and keep accelerating to this end where they just power through the entire purpose of the season. It was that season? It was season 3, I think, wasn't it?
3, yeah.
Yeah. So I think they clearly wanted that to last probably into maybe the next season. But
no, they'd always intended to wrap it up, but they chucked in the kind of they threw in the cliffhanger at the end of season 3 in the hope that it would convince them to commission series 4, which is why it's so crazy. And they did that before having a plot, which you can kind of see when you watch the first 2 episodes of season 4, because it clearly is just like somebody at the end of series 3 was like, throw in an alien Nazi, they're going to want to see what that's about. And then they had to write a script and actually had to involve it somehow. Yeah.
That's true, yeah.
But
actually,
no,
I'm trying to think, how many seasons was Enterprise?
4.
It was 4. It was 4. Yeah, I thought it was 4. Some of I think it was 5 because it really started kicking in at season 4 for core Trek.
Well,
it was a lot of fan service, I think.
I can't remember where it was. I saw it. It may have been on Memory Alpha or one of those sites, but somebody I saw described season 4 as Enterprise's canon repair tour, which I think is a brilliant summation because that's exactly what it was trying to do. Yeah. It really is. It's like we're knitting towards the original series as best we can here. But yeah, so you didn't like the Xindi arc in series 3 anyway?
Not really. No.
That's fair enough. It's going to seem like we're just being contrary, but I, again, disagree with you. I think it's a massive hit. I really love that arc. I love the kind of idea of the Delphic Expanse being this big foreboding thing and the Xindi being... I think they're really cool because they're not one unified species. They're like 5. So I love them as an idea. I love the episode where Archer has to basically trick Degra into thinking that he's changed allegiances, but it's all like one kind of shuttle pod that he's controlling and trying to keep him from figuring out the truth. I love the episode Damage, where the Enterprise, the NX-01, just gets basically shot to pieces and massively damaged, and then Archer has to do the kind of like immoral thing of, we're going to have to steal your warp coil because, you know, we need it kind of thing. So,
yes, indeed. So, a bit of a baddie at that point there, yes.
Yeah, but it's kind of like it is true, but I also I had more of an issue with it at the time, but now it's kind of like he really is desperate and on the last kind of rung of this journey to try to save the whole Earth. And we've even seen in an alternate timeline how badly it turns out if they don't get to it in time. But yeah,
what's that quote from Quark about humanity? You take away they're all
well and good when you have their holodecks powered and their stomachs full, but you take away their creature comforts and they're as bloodthirsty as any Klingon.
That's it. Yes, that is it.
Yeah,
and when the chips are down, they'll do what they need to, for better or worse.
So I love that whole Xindi thing, and I actually really liked the idea that it tied into eventually the slow reveal of the sphere builders and how that was what created the Expanse, and so that gave you the kind of clever, quick way to deal with the problem, I guess, at the end of the season.
Where did it all come from?
Yeah, exactly.
Why it's not been mentioned since?
It was part of the Temporal Cold War, wasn't it? And they kind of just ended that storyline. But you did get the brief shot. That's how you got the Enterprise J and the kind of battle with against the Sphere Builders, which was why they were trying to prevent the Federation. And it's ideas that I kind of liked anyway, personally. I thought the last 2 seasons of Enterprise I thought were great. So
yeah, as an entire arc, nah. But there was certainly nice parts of it, I think, definitely.
Fair enough. And so finally, just to move us on then, the last thing for today, hit or miss the USS Cerritos.
I mean, Lower Decks is just fun, isn't it?
It is.
It's fun. It's Star Trek. It doesn't take itself too seriously.
I'm talking specifically about the ship.
The ship? Oh. It looks a bit weird. Yeah, I don't know. You've got your saucer, you've got the bits hanging off and cells, and then I've completely gone blank. What's the mid-deflector dish hanging between the warp nacelles? And you've never really had anything between the nacelles, really, in most designs.
Fan of the design or no?
Nah.
We may be ending up disagreeing again here.
Yeah,
we only agreed on the first one.
Yeah, well, of course. Why wouldn't you agree on Jadzia Dax? Yes, Cerritos. It's a ship. It flies.
So you're going to say a bit of a miss anyway for you, though.
It's all right. It's Star Trek. It looks Federation, which I think is the best thing you can say. It's definitely, you look at that and go, that is a Federation starship. Is it one of the better looking ones? No, it's not. But it's not meant to be.
So we'll call it a slight miss, maybe, for you. I think it's a hit. I really like it. I like that you can see the design lineage from the Galaxy and the Nebula class, but also hints of the Miranda class. The way that the nacelles are almost like the roll bar, which is what I compare the deflector being between the nacelles to, I guess. Although it is upside down, I guess, to that configuration, but you get the point. And I really like it's such a stupid detail, but I like the fact that the ships all have their own mission assignments, and so the color on the top of the saucer matches whatever their mission is. So the Cerritos is yellow because they're sort of second contact engineering type missions, and the other California class ships you've seen, there've been some red ones and some blue ones for like command missions and medical missions, and I just think that's a really cool touch.
I hadn't noticed. I won't pay attention.
You'll have to go back and look, because you can find images of them all. But yeah, I think Cerritos might be the only yellow one, or there might be one more. But I know for a fact, I think it's the Solvang appeared, which was the red command one, which was immediately destroyed. I think the blue one was on the one with the weird growing vessel thing that ultimately ended up destroyed as well. But yeah, I think it's a really cool kind of ship idea. That was an interesting hit or miss section. I think we had very little agreement. All we could really take away from that is that Jadzia Dax was great, and everything else is a little bit of a mixed bag.
I thought I knew you. My God.
Well, I mean, like I said, there's nothing that I would think is outrageous or terrible, and even the things you said were a miss were like, Enterprise Season 3 is a miss, but great episodes, and Cerritos is a bit of a miss, but at least it looks like a Starfleet ship design, and it's cool enough, Yeah. The next section is going to be the analysis, so we will begin the analysis, which is the main review. And the episode we're doing today, if you couldn't tell from the thumbnail and the little bit of writing on screen and all of the promotion that I've given it, is the Next Generation pilot Encounter at Farpoint. It's the feature-length version, presumably, rather than the 2-part. Not that there's a difference, but that was the one that was on the Blu-ray set, so that's the one I watched.
Yeah, that's one.
Yeah. So we'll get straight into it and just say then, what was your thoughts, without giving too much away, just initially of Encounter at Farpoint when you'd watched it this time around?
It has a lot to do.
It has
a lot to do. It's obviously a brand new show, brand new characters, tries to touch on pretty much everybody in some regards, gives you a brief idea of who everyone is, and it does it well. You can see a lot of things that would later be ironed out. But I'll let that be covered. I don't want to waffle on too much.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think there's a lot of... I think some of the people that write off the episode overall don't necessarily acknowledge how much stuff that it sets up that becomes important later. Which, you know, I'm not going in any order, so we might as well get into it and just say that things like Data's quest to be human and the idea of nice to meet you, Pinocchio, literally started here, and that's his entire arc, like right the way to his whichever one of his deaths you think is the most permanent.
Definitely.
So, and yeah, the idea of, again, the Q putting humanity on trial is something that it looks like they're revisiting in Picard season 2. So that's another ongoing thread that's super important for a long time.
That's it, yeah. Started and ended with Q.
Yeah, and Next Gen itself did, of course, as well. So the setup of Riker and Troy being kind of ex-lovers with that connection. Yes, it's a complete rip-off of Ilea and Decker from the motion picture, but, you know, it's an important plotline.
Yeah, I'm glad they calmed it down a bit later on. It was always a thing. They had a connection. They still, you know, liked each other. It became more of a working relationship, and later on, you know, other things developed from it. But it was a bit soppy at the start. And like,
it was, yeah,
don't
it
want
was.
To see her, can't speak to her. Oh.
Yeah, it was very melodramatic and like, can you still hear my thoughts? I can't say goodbye. And it was kind of, we're getting a bit soap opera here, aren't we?
That would probably be my summary of that. It was like a soap opera.
Yeah.
Very dramatic.
Yeah. And yet it doesn't really, like you say, it tempers it down. So as you get further into the series, it doesn't play as over the top as that. Even when they're married and stuff, it's not like that level of melodrama. But anyway, speaking of which, it also establishes the whole weird dynamic that's going on between Picard and the Crushers. So you have the establishment that Picard was the one who basically ordered Dr. Crusher's husband, Wesley's dad, to his death and brought the body home and everything. But clearly, again, from the overly melodramatic music and lighting and acting, there's something going on between Jean-Luc and Beverly there.
And indeed. Thank God Will Wheaton doesn't look anything like him. That would have been creepy.
Questions, yes, indeed. But yeah, and I suppose it does also introduce not just Picard's relationship with Wesley, but Wesley as a character, which is probably for me the least successful part of the episode, because it's as bad as everyone says, really, isn't it? When you remove the rose-tinted goggles, and it's just like, why is there a kid just? Oh, I don't like it. I do not.
If there wasn't that unspoken love interest thing, and it was like old family friend, their kid, and you just give them a quick look around the bridge.
I just can't get on board with the idea that Picard would be like, you know what, man who's never done anything and is only a teenager, come and just be a bridge officer for me and it'll be good experience. Like, dude.
Yeah. It's like, you read about the systems. Clearly you're qualified to use them and you'll deal with high pressure situations.
Yeah, so that's some of the things I think that don't work along with some of the things that do. Like I said, the cool setup and stuff of all those ideas and the character interactions and stuff, the way that they are to each other, I think is surprisingly fully formed for me. The way everybody kind of acts, their characters are all pretty much here. Which, you know, you don't get that in a lot of pilots. A lot of the time it's like, why is everyone acting, when you watch it back, completely different? I think we'll just go anyway and we'll go through it piece by piece, because I have kind of got some chronological notes, even though we touched on little bits and pieces there. So the first thing I'd noticed was it starts from the very beginning, and it is kind of true throughout the episode that there's like a real whimsical magic of exploration kind of sense to this. Especially prevalent in that first music and the kind of the gorgeous shot into like zooming into the window and Picard in shadow and stepping forward and giving his captain's log is very like evocative, I guess is the word.
Yeah, that opening shot, just pans in with the Enterprise, and a bit creepy with Picard in a dark room.
It's just so he can step out of the shadows dramatically. I don't think there's anything more to it than that. But and then straight away, your great data banter that you're straight in with, which surprised me from memory. I didn't realize this was like literally the first line of the episode was, "Oh, Mr. Data, you'd agree Starfleet's orders are unusual," and no, I can't understand the word snoop and whatever else. And I'm kind of like, this is banter that you wouldn't expect to be the very first thing the show gives you. Because again, that's something that kind of runs on throughout the show, and it's arriving here fully like, oh, this character's going to be fun, you know.
And banter as well. It's odd because, especially one thing I did notice rewatching, the amount everyone stands up when they talk.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in Venice, isn't there? Yeah,
It doesn't matter what's going on. They could be doing anything on that console. They want to speak. Let's ignore what's in the console. Those core bridge systems. I'm going to go and talk to the captain. I'll leave them there for a second. Could be ships coming in. Anything. I need to tell the captain something. I'll turn around, face him, stand up, and ignore what I'm doing.
I would put that on the director because it's obviously like he's decided how to shoot that, and he hasn't quite worked out how to shoot the bridge set where everybody's kind of sitting, talking, and the people at the front have to kind of turn around to talk to the captain, I guess. So
yeah,
it's difficult to do, but as you say, it's more present in the first season, I think, than eventually they realise just give swivel chairs or something.
That's it. Yeah, there's a lot of things I think throughout the show, and certainly the early season, phrases they use which are become more refined. Deflectors and shields, and arming the thought on torpedoes, and even arming the phasers, and sensors. How sensors work. The first episode, they go. It's not someone on the bridge that tells them the ship comes. They go off. Picard's messages somewhere else on the ship to tell him what the alert was for.
Well, no, he gets a proximity alert to the captain's chair, which Wesley picks up absent-mindedly, doesn't he? And
where's all the bridge officers who have access to all this?
Well, where's the tactical station? Surely that should be the one you would send a proximity alert to.
Absolutely, and the amount of crew on the ship. I know it's supposed to be full of people, but it was certainly edging a bit more into the original series amount of people on the ship, because everywhere you go in the corridors, there seems to be loads of people.
Yeah,
I was going off on a tangent here, but there's lots of people everywhere, so there's no empty corridors on the Enterprise.
I think that's deliberate because it is to show you that kind of like even the original series, they had like 300-400 people or whatever, and they point out that the Enterprise D, I mean, it's not in this episode, but they mention a few times it's like a floating city in space, and there's like well over 1,000 people, and it includes families and everything. So I think that's deliberate to give you the sense of like, yeah, this ship is crowded with people. And, even Wesley's line, it'll be hard to get bored on this ship, kind of reinforces that it's a multifunctional, different generations altogether kind of thing, not just a military ship. But yeah, either way. So I personally, I'm not sure what you think of this. I love the effect of the cage thing that Q throws around the Enterprise from space.
Right, yeah.
I've always loved that, and I don't know why, because it's so basic. It doesn't look anything special, but...
this day and age, it's a bit old-fashioned, but at the time, and it's a solid. This is a magical barrier sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
With weird, like a futuristic barbed wire fence.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, okay.
But I like that. It's the same reason that I love the Tholian web, but even though it's really basic and it is just literally like you're just spinning a web full of squares around something, but it looks cool. But yeah, speaking of Q, I really love the direction choice of showing Picard a couple of times with that negative space over his shoulder, his right shoulder, and then having that be where Q just kind of blinks in for the very first time is such a really cool directorial choice, I think, because it does kind of catch you off guard. It's like, what the heck? And I do think John De Lancie is just outstanding from like word one, and he steals the episode. Would you agree or no?
Yeah, definitely. The different personas he turns up as, each one is distinctly different.
It is.
That's really good, yeah. Very thespian at the start as well, when he turns up as a ship captain.
He comes, doesn't he? Because he's giving it, thou comest to thee as a former ship captain, and so that you may understand me, or whatever, and like you say, it's... I think it's clearly, this guy clearly has a knack for the theatrical, but we'll get into talking about Q because it's interesting and we can go through the kind of the whole thing. But what I noticed, which I didn't remember again the same way, I remembered him being way more of a villain and kind of nasty and evil initially in his assessment, and then gradually getting more and more like impish as the show goes on. But watching it back, he's actually kind of already a little bit of that impish kind of... quality and stuff anyway. And there's points
Playful, yeah.
Yeah, playful and yes, fair enough. It's horrible with the court stuff, and that all gets really super intense. But even then, at the end of the episode, I was genuinely surprised when he points out that he is trying to help them and he's telling them what to do. Yeah, so Zorn's abducted, and Troy said she feels the satisfaction of the thing torturing, and then Q's the one who's like, we should go beam over there and see what's going on and whatever else. And even, like I said, has the line, "Oh, I'm trying to help you, watch your temper, Captain," or whatever. And then only once he realizes they're doing the right course of action does he completely change tactic, and he's like, "Oh no, fire faces at them, do everything, that's the wrong thing all of a sudden." So I think there is a little bit of that, like he respects them and he does want them to ultimately win the test, for if you go looking for that anyway. Yeah. But the courtroom stuff though is brutal, obviously. So
yeah, that's definitely nasty.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me into the other thing, which is a very weird thing that the episode added for Gene Roddenberry, because it's not like him at all, and he did kind of co-write the episode and wrote this part of the story. The kind of post-atomic horror stuff that he goes into, which is a new addition to the lore.
Yeah.
It's really dark, the kind of like soldiers being controlled by drugs, and then these courts now really have guilty until proven innocent, because bringing the innocent to trial would be unfair.
Yeah, you can go logical, but wait there. No.
Yeah, it's fascist states though, isn't it? And stuff. The slight thing that bugs me is that it's a court from 2079, which is many years after First Contact has happened, which kind of doesn't jibe with the rest of the chronology of the show, or does, because maybe that's why the Vulcans in Enterprise are so kind of like, we still don't trust you. It took you a long time to stop being really barbaric, even when we landed,
I mean, you could have different parts of the world, obviously, and,
of course,
things like that.
It does seem to kind of semi-racist kind of hint that it's somewhere in Asia, I think, by the layout and a lot of the background characters. But yeah,
well, most the sort of audience, shall we say, of that, I think are just American people, basically.
Well,
whereas it's just the announcer and the guy with the gong obviously fit that Oriental style.
Yeah, completely. But it's just a surprise that it's something so dark from an era when things were supposed to be kind of turning around, and it was a weird thing, like I said, for Gene to kind of put on, because I think this is the first time they mentioned that there will be a World War III and it'll be this nuclear horror and lead to mutations. And like I said, just the dark idea of controlling soldiers with drugs who are, and again, that really brutal scene of the guy who gets bested by Tasha. So he just takes a sniff of his drugs before getting shot and killed by the other dude because he's failed in his duty. And I was like, wow, that is really dark. I am shocked by how brutal it is. But
a bit of a prelude to the Jem'Hadar, I suppose, actually, as well.
Actually, yeah.
Control and things.
Good point. The Ketracel White thing, yeah.
Yeah. And
never occurred to me.
They're dead, and they go into battle to get their lives back, and that's very dark. And yeah, you're dead. If you want to live, go and do this thing, and if you survive, well, you survive.
Yeah, I'm with you though. I think that the way that it links it to like periods in Earth's history, because he even does the whole 50s and 60s era. The issue is patriotism. We're going to destroy the commies. We need a few good men, kind of. So it makes it all part of that same lineage, and it is, like Picard says, we remember our history even when we're ashamed of it, because it is a lot to be kind of ashamed of, but they're kind of proving that's not who they are now, which I loved that as well, the touch that it's actually Picard who comes up with the idea of like, well, test us now. And Q, who's like, oh, that's a great idea, excellent. Because initially he took his ideas for the court and everything anyway, but then when they're in the court and he realizes how unfair it is and everything, I just wanted to say really quickly, this is just a really funny note, but when Q first appears and Lieutenant Torres tries to sort of jump up and zap him and he gets frozen, he's clearly like frozen, complete frost and ice all over him, and Troy just runs over and goes, he's frozen! And I've just made the note, I mean, we really didn't need the commentary on that one, did we?
Yeah, she was a bit ditzy, I think, on that, yeah.
But God. We have to talk about the next bit, which is the saucer separation. My word, they're very proud of that, aren't they?
They are. And I actually looked this up because I was like, I want to mention that. They only used that Well,
3 times.
3 times?
Four
Four if you
if you
class the
include
movie.
Yeah, 4 if you include Generations, which was a separation and a destruction of the drive section. But yeah.
Indeed. But yeah, obviously you got that one, Best of Both Worlds, and it was Arsenal of Freedom.
Arsenal of Freedom, yeah, that's the
Yeah,
separation.
against the weird floaty drone things, of which there seemed to be a massive one in space while they're at it. Where that came from and where that went, who knows?
We'll review that another time, I'm sure. But yeah, it's really weird because you can see, and again, I've read all about it as well, how they wanted the source of separation to be an almost weekly thing, because it was a cool new thing the ship could do, and then realized it was just far too expensive and cost prohibitive to do it. So it's weird how it did only happen like 3 times at random throughout the show.
Well, that's it. I think that the first couple of times you show it separating, and after that, it's just initiate source separation. You have to literally walk off the bridge, a couple of seconds, and then something happens, and then they could be just sitting on the battle bridge at that stage. You don't have to see them walking in and.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in this. I think that's the thing. I've also made that note is that there's a lot of clearly stalling for time, and that was when I was reading about like the formation of the episode and how it came about. It was supposedly because there was like a bitter argument between Roddenberry and the studio about whether this would be an hour with adverts or 2 hours or an hour and a half. And he asked kind of DC Fontana to write the episode, and she only wrote enough for just over an hour. Because that was what she was kind of told to do at the time. And then it was Gene who took it away and was like, oh, I'll pad it out to give them their 2 hours then that they want, which, controversial. It might have been potentially to get wages out of her or something, but I'm not here to discuss the legalities of it. But either way, it was him who basically wrote the entire Q plotline, and DC Fontana who wrote the Farpoint Station mystery and the Bandy and everything. So you can kind of see that there's a little bit of a cut and shut moment in the halfway point, and it does feel a little bit like 2 stories at times that don't seem to fit, but then by the end really find their link, which is cool. But yeah, the fact that Roddenberry had to write stuff to make it up to the 2 hours is painfully apparent, because like you said, the source of separation takes forever. It's like walking and tracking them through the ship and arriving in the battle bridge and sitting at your station and showing the ship in space and then showing it decoupling and then showing the thing go away. And then even when he makes Riker do the manual reassembly, and it's like, we're really going to spend 5 minutes just showing you reattaching the saucer. This is something that, like, future seasons would literally be a line of dialogue, like, and reattach the saucer, and then you just wouldn't see it. It would just be fine.
New scene, 20 minutes later, it's done. They're all back to business. Someone's having a cup of tea or your cup of Mochaccino.
Exactly.
And like showing Wes around the bridge, exactly the same thing.
Yes.
That's the filler. They could have just not bothered having that at all.
Yeah, I guess, but in that case, I like it because it's the wonder of showing the bridge, and so it does give you that kind of small look around moment, and it doesn't seem to drag as much as some of the other stuff. But yeah, the things that really dragged for me was this whole source of separation kind of thing, and I had a few questions about it on this again really nerdy kind of technical is it possible level, which is that they say that they're doing it at warp. That's really, really surely. As soon as the saucer detaches, given that it doesn't have warp engines, the drive section would just slice through it, wouldn't it?
I thought the saucer section did have a low warp.
No, it just has the impulse engines. That's kind of the whole point. Like the warp, the nacelles are on the drive section. The impulse engines are on the top of the saucer section. I'm not sure if the drive has impulse as well. Maybe it only has warp, but yeah, because I'm sure in one of the episodes,
the main impulse.
Of course, it's at the back, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, technically, the science thing, you would keep that momentum going until something acts against you to slow you down. But then we're getting into the science of how warp drive works, so let's not.
That's the thing. I mean, I can hand wave it away because I can kind of say, well, the saucer was still within the warp bubble, even though it was separated or whatever. But it is kind of like, really, have you thought this through when you wrote it? It's a little bit sus to me, But again, it looks really cool, so who cares? It's the same with even when they're recoupling. Like, I don't love that the scene takes forever and it's completely superfluous, but at the same time, watching the little docking clamps like rise up and attach, it looks really cool.
First time, second time, you have to explain that sort of thing, and then afterwards, it becomes it happened.
Yeah,
done.
Exactly, yeah. But so we get anyway a couple of little good character moments, I think, here as well. So first of all, I just wanted to mention O'Brien, his first appearance.
And in a red shirt.
I know, a red shirt. What's that about? But never mind. So
Like
yeah,
you
he's
see him
a
the odd times throughout the start, but he gets gets a couple of lines, that sort of thing. And it's not
yeah.
until the Keiko thing happens where
Mm.
he's actually, and that's where they really introduce the characters. That's a couple of seasons in actually as well.
It's quite late. It's like season 4 or something. Because doesn't he? He's like he's dotted about just randomly in different places, and then I think by season 2 he's the transporter chief, and they've established that. And then it's not
Yeah.
until, like you say, season 4 when it's like he actually gets a life and a wife and everything, and they develop him a little bit more before heading off to DS9 to really give the character some dues, you know. But yeah, on a more sort of familiar notice, I really like the way that Picard's really sweet to Tasha, because like he's portrayed kind of as a hard ass, I think, a lot of the times, and the really strict disciplinarian captain. But when she's like, we should absolutely fight, and he's like, well, what are we going to do against something that can do all that? I'm open to suggestions. And she kind of looks crestfallen and just says, I spoke before I thought, sir. I'm really sorry. And he's like, it's okay. I understand. It's perfectly fine. You know, you did your best. You were, you reacted as well as you could or whatever. But I was like, that's
He's
surprisingly
scolding
sweet.
Worf. He scolds Worf later on
He
for putting
does,
a
but
phaser on the view screen.
he does, but only because Riker kind of then fulfills the opposite function, because Riker's the one, and I think that's deliberate for me. Riker's the one who's kind of like, you acted quickly. It's a good thing to be. And then Picard's like, but foolishly. And I was like, I can forgive it because he can clearly see that like Riker's given him the good cop routine, I guess, you know. But yeah, I like that it's quickly established. By the way, we're going straight into the court. United Earth has been abolished, all that nonsense, even though it hasn't. But we'll ignore that. But we'll go straight into the court scenes and see. I like that it's established it's not an illusion or a dream straight away, that it's real, because that sets up the stakes for this episode and for every future time Q appears. Because it could be too easy to be like, well, it doesn't matter if somebody dies because it's only an illusion. I also love how resolute Picard is against Q. Like he completely stands up to him and more than holds his own. He's like a skillful kind of out-lawyering the judge kind of thing, you know, with I'm not reading these charges because they're not against us, and this isn't really a fair thing, and you stick to your rules. And then Q gets so frustrated, he's like, well, just shoot them if he says anything other than guilty. And Picard reluctantly says guilty, but then just adds provisionally. So he still gets kind of the last word. I'm like, yes, that's very
he still has that confidence later, like against he's standing in front of the Klingon High Council, and he's got that resolute, he's certain of who he is. But in the episodes, a lot of him having doubt as well. Picard with that doubt.
It is, but yeah, it is internally, but I don't think he ever really shows it to the crew. Certainly not to the villains of the piece, either Q or I suppose Zorn and the Bandy as well later. He's very like determined towards them, so I like that in a captain, you know, it's cool. Don't love randomly that the direction here just goes really weird. Maybe it was just my Blu-ray, but I don't think so. That it just turns like everything has a black smudge around the border as Picard and Q are arguing, and I was kind of like, what was this decision about? It just all looks like a weird black mist has descended, and I could do without that. That Q recognizes the Farpoint mission as a good idea for testing them. That's a good way that the two stories interact, and it's done cleverly. It's weird to me that they introduce Riker and half of the crew half an hour in. It seems odd, but apparently the makers of the show and stuff loved it so much that when they were writing the DS9 pilot, they did the same thing. So they don't introduce like Dax and some of the other crew until the what they call the third or fourth act of the pilot. And I was like, it seems odd to me, but okay, if you think it worked, fair enough.
I mean, I suppose not everyone's going to get there at the same time, and that sort of proves it. The fact that they're at some random space station on the edges of Federation space, as it's described, and just get dropped off there.
Yeah.
Well, did the Enterprise not come from Earth?
Well, it's never made clear, really, is it? I mean, yeah, it's very weird. But I find it odd as a pilot that we didn't like introduce the ship's crew already there. It's not bad. I think it's a really cool, unusual choice, but it just strikes me when Riker and stuff does appear that you're like, oh crap, yeah, they're not all together, are they? They're in a different place here. But yeah, I suppose it's a good way to stagger the introductions and not feel like you're bombarding exposition on the audience, I guess.
Geordie nice. In red as well as command rather than his yellow.
Well, he was in Red for the first season until he became chief engineer, because he
Yeah,
was
that's it, yeah.
he was the pilot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, speaking of Geordie the White, it is nice that they actually explain his visor in his second scene, because I wasn't sure if that does happen in the pilot or not. But yeah, you get the full explanation of what it does. It sees EM things. It's kind of sight, but not, and it hurts, frankly, because it's not the real senses. Which it gives you some like really sad pathos to that character right away. That he's like, well, I can't take painkillers or have surgery because then it would affect the way it works. So I guess I'm just going to have to live with the pain. And I was like, wow. It's weird that a scene ends on Star Trek with like, well, there was no resolution to that then, was there? You've just got to be like, oh, well. I do wonder if the new kind of ocular implants he gets by the movies have avoided that pain. And if they have, why the heck he didn't just do that sooner? But,
Well, I think he always said they were an option, but they weren't quite as good as a visor.
Ah, right. Okay. Well, that makes sense, I guess.
Like the 20% difference or something. So it was like, well, I suppose.
But we see them zooming in First Contact and doing loads of cool stuff. Although maybe they've just developed, I suppose, by that point in time. It's been like 10 years or something.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So what did you think randomly? We'll get onto the bigger thing, the Bandy mystery and the Farpoint station stuff. What did you make of all that?
Meh.
Not a fan then, eh?
Yeah, the Bandy have done something. Okay. I was more interested in Q and all that, and wanted for it to get back to that, which seemed a lot more exciting. Yeah. And this was just like a little side thing of like, the Bandy, okay, some random bunch of people, and obviously the mystery there of the apples appearing or the cloth appearing,
absolutely,
and stuff like that. It's like, okay, that's weird. But then we've got this guy who's just clicking his fingers, and all this other stuff's happened. So it's like,
it's weird that they don't immediately kind of go to the pains to point out that these things aren't connected in that way. They do eventually say it's not Q that's doing it, and that's the thing I like about this is I like that it's that mystery. Like immediately you see Zorn talking to just thin air, like don't do that or we'll have to punish you, and we will. And you don't know initially like what he's or who he's talking to, which is really odd. But I love that mystery. Unfortunately, I think by the time you get to the third or fourth scene of Troy in the tunnels going, I can feel pain and suffering. And I was like, yeah, we know. Get on with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, you've already said the filler and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was padding for time, really, wasn't it? But yeah, I thought good acting, though. I thought Marina did, even though she apparently hates her acting, I thought she was really good when she actually like is sort of broken down to tears by feeling the Farpoint life form, and then feels the great joy at the very end when they're reunited with the very cheesy close-up of the tendrils holding hands and stuff, But yeah, so I thought she did a good enough job. But what do you think about the acting in general in the episode? Do you think there's a standout other than obviously De Lancie as Q?
I think they're also really raw. It's odd. Data's a bit menacing at times.
Yeah, Data's a little weird because he's playing the kind of innocence of a child type thing a little bit more than the character would settle into. But I think that's the way that he's written when he doesn't understand like some basic words and stuff. So yeah, I can see what you're saying with that. Excuse me, but I think the rest of the characters, like I said, I was surprised how kind of fully formed like Picard and Riker are, and I suppose that's probably it. Like, to be fair, because Dr. Crusher again is way too brash at first than she would eventually be in the series. Although I do love Yar in this episode as well. I think she's kind of arriving fully formed as the character, but then she doesn't get long anyway. So
yeah, this is it. Everyone gets sort of touched on, all the main characters and things, and that's about it.
Yeah, I do love little moments though, like the little character moment of Worf saying that he initially was reluctant to take the saucer section because as a Klingon to seek escape when his captain goes into battle would be dishonorable. I was like, you didn't need that scene, but it's a nice little touch because it gives you a lot about those characters, that Worf is still kind of the Klingon heart and Picard is still taking none of his BS and like, no, you'll do as you're told. You're a Starfleet officer.
That's it. I mean, I understand why he eventually takes over because you have two characters there who are very much in for the kill.
Yeah.
And eventually that is just Worf, and you expect it of Worf.
Yeah.
That's why Worf's good in Next Gen, but his character really comes to life a lot more in DS9, where you see a lot more of, I suppose, the Klingon side of it as well. But you've obviously already got the build-up from Next Gen.
Just a couple of scenes I wanted to go over. The first reference to Picard hating kids and asking Riker to help with his kind of image is a really nice character touch, but they kind of abandon that, I think, later.
He gets more interaction and it becomes less of a thing, yeah.
I love the episode Disaster when he's like trapped in the lift with the kids, but
Yeah.
I don't think it does enough with the whole, like, if he's really that uncomfortable with kids, it should be a huge, major, awkward kind of dilemma, and it seems like very quick and easy, and at the end of it, he's like, I'm actually fine with kids now.
It's still a leader, and it's still an emergency.
Yeah.
That would kick in and be like, right, I need to do something. I can't, I suppose, leave the kids here. And he falls back on what he knows, singing the climbing song and stuff like that.
So, but on the same scene, when Picard is grilling, or a similar scene, when Picard is grilling Riker, and he talks about how Riker won't allow the captain to beam into a dangerous situation, and he's kind of interviewing him about, do you trust the captain's orders? And what do you think of that whole scene? Are you a fan of it, or not so much? Because they make a lot of reference to that in the first season as well.
I mean, it's like, this conflict and stuff like that. But I think it's important that it was then and done, because, Riker is the one who will go down for the rest of the show, basically, on the away missions, and the captain is on the ship.
Yes.
And they're making that difference between the original series, where Kirk was there every time.
That was exactly my note. Yeah, I think that entire scene is basically whoever wrote it, Gene, for example, writing, by the way, this isn't the original series, so don't expect to see Patrick Stewart getting into fist fights every week on a planet. What did you think of the appearance by Admiral McCoy seeing the ship off? That was apparently a surprise at the time.
I wouldn't know how they got him in, yeah.
Well, he was offered, he was like really honoured and came in and did it, and they kept it a complete surprise. The character was only listed as Admiral, so apparently on the very first night it went out, that was actually like a pleasant surprise for the audience. But I just love that scene, the way that it establishes the kind of comparing Data's struggle to Spock's. The kind of, you look like a Vulcan. It can be a pain in the butt sometimes, but, and then just the glorious thing about treat the Enterprise like a lady. She's got the right name and she'll always get you home kind of thing. It's a nice little touch, I think. But
yeah, it's a passing the torch sort of thing, yeah.
I do, this, again, we're moving on a little bit here, but I find it weird, the propaganda moment when Zorn is threatening to go to the Ferengi and Picard says, like, I hope they find you as tasty as their last client. And I was like, well, they really didn't know what they were doing with the Ferengi in the first season, did they? Until they really were like, well, we can't really make them the ultimate bad guy because they're just ridiculous.
Yeah, once they actually put them out, they were menacing, but they weren't that menacing, and that's where they brought in the Borg, but the Borg were the uber bad.
Yeah.
And then from there, like the step beneath, the more regular became obviously the Romulans, really, and then the Cardassians later on
completely.
a bit.
But yeah, I do remember reading that the Ferengi were supposed to be the next gen equivalent of the Klingons because they were kind of playing nice and served in Starfleet with Worf and everything, but it just didn't really happen. And I find it hilarious that this line kind of has to be explained. So I was reading on the wiki page that there's like a book or something which explains that Grand Nagus Zek was basically spreading propaganda because he was terrified of the Federation, because he didn't believe that anybody who doesn't deal with money could be any kind of rational or sane. So he was terrified of them. So he was spreading these rumors of like, we are vicious, we will eat you and stuff. And I was like, wow, that's some great retconning of a completely different line, but I like it anyway.
Yeah.
We're getting to the end now, but basically we've already went over kind of what your thoughts are on the Farpoint mystery. I like it. I like that it's convenient when the flying saucer version comes in and it turns out to be its mate and whatever, but it gets you to where you need to be. So
yeah.
And I will say the special effects on the Blu-ray are massively improved for the space dwelling life form. It looks super realistic, which I don't remember it looking when I last watched it. And I didn't notice, apparently it is actually different on the upscaled HD. You can see that one of them's blue and one of them's pink, whereas they both just looked blue in the original version. Which is a nice little touch. So that's just my slight plug for Blu-ray about why it's better. But I think that's basically. Oh, that was the other thing. Talking about padding while I'm giving the negatives, the Crusher scene with Picard when he's already shouted at her, then he goes down to the office to kind of formally welcome her. It's a really good scene and everything, but it seems to be placed in the wrong place. because it's like Q's testing them, the ship is firing at the surface and everything, and he just disappears for a chat with Dr. Crusher for 5 minutes. And
yes, that's a good point. Yeah, we're beyond just doing something personal. But wait a minute.
and
I mean, that must have taken him about 5-10 minutes to get down there. I don't know how long, the distance wise, and turbo shaft. It's like, oh, yeah, come visit, have a chat, and come back.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the city that you're there, well, not quite the city. Obviously, Farpoint's fine. That's our actual thing.
Yeah. I don't know if you noticed around these kinds of scenes, it was a line I picked up on because I thought it was very meta. When they're in the caverns and Data's explaining everything, and then Data actually has the line, "Sorry, sir, I seem to be commenting on everything." And I was like, well, see, then at least. And Riker's like, "Oh, keep on doing it, my friend." But I'm like, yeah, maybe not. It gets a little bit tiresome after a while. Move to the next section of this analysis, which is the Gene's vision section. I noted a few things I thought that fit into the kind of Trek ideology, but I'm curious if you did, or if you'd want me to just go over and see if you agree or disagree.
I think you were probably watching it with that in mind, really.
A little, but I also I picked out notes that I'd made that I thought was like, that's one thing, but put them in one section as well. So I'll just go ahead and say I thought that the initial idea that Picard got the soul set to safety and then surrendered was a very sort of Trek to me kind of idea. Like, he didn't go in guns blazing, and he ensured the civilians were safe before even surrendering. It was really cool. I've mentioned already the McCoy scene kind of fits into the Star Trek lineage really well. I love the line of we're going to carry on doing our job because if we're to be damned, let's be damned for what we really are. Again, that's very, very Trek. Data's quest to be human, which again we'll go into in detail because that happens throughout the show. But I think again that's such a brilliantly Star Trek idea, the outsider that wants to be more human and accepted, and immediately the first hints of prejudice, because he even says to Riker, yes, prejudice is very human, And related to what you said, when he's getting fired on, at least the medical team are ready to immediately help, because at first I was like, there's casualties down there, what's going on? And then Q calls it out like 2 minutes later, and Picard points out that he doesn't even have to tell her. Crusher's like preparing med teams. Like, that's fine, cool. Other dialogue I noticed, I can't remember who it's with, but somebody's talking to Picard, and Picard says, "I'll attend to my duty." And I think it's Riker says, "Till the bitter end." And Picard's response is just gorgeous. I see nothing so bitter about that. Again, that's very Star Trek, isn't it, really? Sticking up for the uniform and the mission, and the idea of the life form overall, I think, is a very Star Trek idea, because it's so outlandish and out there, but it's ultimately not an enemy. It's a friend who's being mistreated that they've got to help. So that's nice. And finally, the last lines are just pure the summation of Star Trek for me, which is, I hope all of our missions aren't like this one. I'm sure most will be much more interesting. Let's see what's out there. Engage. I was like, that's it, isn't it? That sums it right up. So,
I cannot disagree at all. That's spot on.
Awesome. Nothing else that you picked up on then apart from that? You just agree?
Yeah, I mean, it does what I think Gene wanted Star Trek to do, which was to introduce thoughts and ideas to the viewers, really. Things that you maybe see around, well, these days on the news or but just out in the world, that at the time would be unheard of, and things like that. The diversity in their kids, being part of it all.
That's a good point, and also just the thought-provoking nature of like where we could be headed down that dark road in this episode of like look at humanity's past and things that we've done that are terrible, and what could happen in the future if we're not careful. And we want the ideal, but we might have to go through hardship first, kind of thing.
You've got your former enemies serving with you. Yes. You've got obviously disabled people, the visor, sort of sitting there, women in charge of security and things like that, and men taking cues from them and things.
And a man wearing a dress randomly.
Yes, a man wearing a dress. Indeed. I did notice actually Tasha Yar wearing a dress at the end of the show.
Yeah, the only time she wears the dress version of the uniform.
Yeah, because that's her legs.
Very surprised. Oh, and that was the other line that I thought was, I almost missed it, but I would have been devastated. The other line that I think is very Trek that sums everything up perfectly, and I forgot to call it out, is when Yar really does lose her temper with the court and says, this court should get down on its knees to what Starfleet is and what it represents, because Starfleet was the ones that saved her from kind of her brutal world and everything. And so I was like, yeah, that's really cool. I remember using that as a great summation, I think, of Star Trek and Starfleet during an essay in an old media studies class back in the day. But we'll. Do you have a little conclusion and your score rating, or do you have to think of one on the fly? Because I can go first if you want.
Yeah, you know what you're saying. I'll see if I can think of anything else.
I'll give you an idea. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to just a one sentence thing or something, but I always have something written because my brain doesn't function on the fly very well, so I like to have it written out. Just to let you know, the rating system that I'm going to be using is out of 5 Starfleet deltas. Okay. So it's a score out of 5, basically. But yeah, so I'll get into the conclusion and give you my score. My conclusion is that it's an incredibly functional pilot that serves to brilliantly introduce the new series, ship, characters, relationships, and storylines that will continue to be important even to this day. The Farpoint plotline on its own is the weaker half, but it pairs with and feeds into the Q Humanity on Trial storyline quite expertly. It's surprising how fully formed the characters are already, and there's more than enough here, in my opinion, to keep the audience watching and give them a hint of what to expect. It's not perfect. The pace does lag a little bit, and some scenes feel misplaced or unnecessary, but there's a lot that is necessary and well executed as well. There's also a sense of 2 stories being welded together, but both stories also perfectly examine and emphasize the Trek ideology, culminating in a hopeful, optimistic ending that seems well-suited, promising excitement and adventure to come. And so my final score for this was 4 Starfleet Deltas out of 5.
Ooh.
But don't let that sway your opinion one way or the other.
No, I certainly wouldn't go that high. Not because I don't like it.
Yeah.
But
I was surprised. I remembered it not being as good, but on rewatching, I was like, no, there's a lot of stuff here that I have to give props for, and it was a really enjoyable thing with some key things, some key building blocks that it's putting in place. So that was the reason I went a little bit higher.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go 2.
No conclusion, just straight into the score.
Well, no, I'm going to explain about it, but my thoughts about it. I think yeah, I mean, it is. You covered it there, and I think I've mentioned we've discussed the parts of it where it's a pilot. It's a lot of raw stuff that goes on there. The characters aren't fully formed. There's a lot of things I think that would change and round off as the characters develop and the show progresses. So in terms of what it is to what it will become, it is very, very raw, and a bit cringeworthy at times, and that's why I'm sort of giving it that lower score. I could easily be argued up to a 3, quite to sit on the fence.
It's your score, but yeah, I think that's the thing. That neither one of us are wrong. I personally thought they were quite well formed, and I like the kind of the emotional impact I had from certain lines and stuff that did work for me. Like I mentioned, Yar and Picard's speeches and moments like that. But you're absolutely right in that there's also equally cringy moments like the stuff we mentioned between Picard and Crusher, or Riker and Troy. So you're not wrong, and if it just hits you in that way, then yeah. So
I was going to say to someone, recommend watching Next Generation, I wouldn't say skip the first episode by any means, but sit and watch it from the start and see where it starts to where it gets to at the end.
That's I think I'm also more forgiving because I know how terrible I thought the next 2 episodes were when it gets into the show properly. Because the Naked Now and Code of Honor, those are rough episodes, man. So comparatively, they do kind of make this look like Shakespeare. But, yeah. But anyway, so that was going to be your final score. Would be 2 Delta Shields out of 5.
2. Yeah, there's a lot going on. It's very raw. It's not bad, and I think is the worst episodes.
Oh, there's definitely worse episodes, especially in that first season and a half, 2 seasons.
Yeah,
I would say that. Like I say, Code of Honor. I don't know if we'll ever review it, but if we did, that might be a contender for. I don't know if I can actually legitimately even give it half of a badge Delta, but it's not even subtle, really, is it? But yeah,
absolutely, yes, that one.
It's a shame because Tasha gets so few stories, and that being one of them is so unfortunate because it's almost unwatchable. But yeah,
I did enjoy making a point of catching her final shot in the show, which I remember you pointed out to me. Actually, it's not the final. It's not the episode she dies.
Yeah.
Skin of Evil. It's her final shot. You told me
Mm-hmm.
was actually in the episode beforehand.
Yep.
Where they're doing something, and I think it's Picard and Crusher walking out of a cargo bay, and you see her in the background just wave.
Yeah, I love that. Do look out for that, audience, because there is that great moment, because it is her last shot, but it's the episode before Skin of Evil.
Focus isn't on her. Yeah, you could just miss it and just see some movement, because the focus is on the characters walking towards the camera. Yeah.
It's cool, though. I like it. That gives us a nice, easy average to work out for the podcast. So our overall score for Encounter at Farpoint would be 3 Starfleet Deltas out of 5, which I think is a fair little rating to land on, to be honest.
Yeah. I could have been talked up to a 3, but that makes the maths easy. We don't want 0.5 yet. Let's avoid that.
Well, I mean, I would, but like I said, you thought it was a 2. I thought it was a 4. We may as well meet in the middle and...
I think 3 is a good average.
Split the difference. And I think, personally, maybe I went a little high, maybe you went a little low, so 3 average works for me as a kind of representation of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Just bear with me, because I'm looking for the feedback that I asked for, because this is going to be the Subspace Communication section, which is what I'm calling our little audience interaction.
Okay.
I didn't get many responses to this, but I did get 1 or 2. The first one is from @Mr_Picard. So I think we know what is going to happen, but he says, I know the episode gets a lot of erg reactions, but I like it despite its awkward moments. I think it's great if you just don't take it too seriously. It also has some really great John Luke moments, but then I might just be a little biased in that particular regard. Yeah, you don't say. The Metal Hoovian says, love it. It's a great start to a rather tough season loaded with lovable characters, and the show just keeps getting better. It was my favorite Star Trek show until watching Discovery recently. Okay. At Mr. Sky Tortori, Marie, maybe, says, interesting enough to keep me watching. I had my doubts, as I didn't think it could be as good as TOS, but I turned out to love it even more. For me, it was Q that kept my interest, and he stayed one of my favorite characters throughout the series. Strong agree with that. And then at iRichards10 simply says, I love every episode Q appeared in, whichever show it was. Almost strong agree. There's a couple of iffy ones. At Camos Mills has literally given a 3-word review. I love it. There you go. At Mr_G Ward says, I liked it. It felt like the original series at this stage, which was important to establish itself back then. The 2-part nature allowed a full story on top of meeting the new crew and set the tone for Picard and the era. Q was maddening but compelling, and I still enjoy it now. At Trundles just says, this, of course, was before the introduction of the main protagonist, Riker's beard. And then Mr. G Ward chimes back in to simply say, counterpointed in DS9 by Sisko's beard. So there you go.
Indeed.
Weird conversation in my comments here.
That's a classic Riker maneuver of taking the stance.
Indeed. At iRichards10 chimes in with her own review and just says, it was okay. De Lancie was the star, though. Hoopy, muddle-aged variant Time Lord responds, De Lancie's just brilliant, great actor, good in the episodes of Stargate SG-1 he was in. So, there we go. At Michael Sheehan says, I did the pilot Encounter at Farpoint, and the very first time we see the Enterprise D saucer separation take place. So, yeah, here we go. And finally, at DWSSG01 says, not keen in 1987 when I saw it first. Now I've warmed to it, but it still has flaws. Patrick Stewart is still great, though. So, yeah, I think it's overall, tempered liking, but not loving. I think that's probably the fairest way we could put it.
I think that 3 is a good, 3 deltas is a good representation from that.
I agree, absolutely. It seems fair. So that's a good first episode in the books and a good first review, I think. It came out kind of fair. So just remains for me to sign off and say thank you so much, old friend, for joining me. Old man, I should say, in the Cisco Dax style. It was nice to catch up with you and just talk anyway. It's been far too long.
Absolutely.
But anytime you want to talk Trek, you know where I am, or just anything in general. You can catch me at Iron Mike Wilson on Twitter, or ideally the podcast itself at HoM Trek. That's HOM Trek. It stands for hit or miss, but it could also be Mr. HoM from Trek, I realized, so you never know. And, did you have any sort of social media handles or anything you want to shout out for people? Or?
No, I'm not that social. God.
Fair enough. But I'll just let you all know, audience, that next time I am being joined by the amazing Linda Butler, who is fantastic on Star Trek Twitter. A lovely Irish lady. She's fantastic and sweet, and she's agreed to come on, and we are going to review the Star Trek Lower Decks Season 1 finale, No Small Parts. So that should be an interesting episode. So stay tuned next week for that one. And yeah, thanks again, Browny, for joining me. Keep watching Star Trek. Till next time, listener, remember, we are Starfleet. Live long and prosper.